found out she was dead as I just started screaming.
Is the monster who murdered my daughter doesn't have a chance to murder anybody else's.
It looks like paradise at first glance. Warm air, ocean views stretching endlessly, palm trees swaying like nothing bad has ever happened here. A place designed to make you forget where you are, and maybe even who you are. This is the kind of place where danger isn't supposed to exist, where security is promised, walls are high, and reality feels carefully edited. A young woman steps onto a balcony, smiling, unaware that this moment will soon become a haunting timestamp. Inside the gates, everything feels controlled. Outside them, a very different world operates quietly, efficiently, and without mercy. Two realities, separated by a fence, yet somehow destined to collide. What happens when something unthinkable unfolds in a place built to feel untouchable? When a case begins with luxury and celebration, but ends in silence, unanswered questions, and contradictions that refuse to disappear. Because this story isn't just about what happened that night. It's about what doesn't add up. And once you see the details, it becomes impossible to look away. She was 23 years old. She lived in Dawson Creek, British Columbia. For most of her life, travel had been more of a dream than a reality. She talked about it constantly, she planned for it, she imagined it long before she could afford it. And this trip mattered more than most. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a milestone. Her first time leaving Canada, a birthday celebration she had organized herself. Sun, water, ruins, beaches, freedom. All the things she felt she had earned. In early March of 2023, she arrived in Playa del Carmen with her boyfriend. They checked into a large, gated, 5-star resort, the kind of place that markets itself as self-contained. Guests are encouraged not to leave. Food, drinks, entertainment, security, everything is meant to exist within the property lines. The promise is simple. Once you're inside, you're safe. Videos sent to family show her relaxed, smiling, excited. In the final video she ever recorded, she's standing on the balcony of their hotel room, casually talking about grabbing food and heading to the beach. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels wrong. It's the kind of clip families replay over and over, searching for something they missed. Less than 12 hours after that video was taken, she was gone. On the night of March 2nd, surveillance cameras captured the couple at a resort bar shortly before midnight. They were drinking together, laughing, moving through a space filled with other tourists and staff. Eventually, the cameras show them leaving the bar. This is the last confirmed footage of her alive. From this point forward, everything becomes fragile. Timelines narrow, certainty disappears. And the investigation begins to lean heavily on a single account of events, because after that bar, no camera follows them. At approximately 2:55 a.m., a resort cleaner arrived at a laundry room on the property. This wasn't a public space. Guests had no reason to be there. Inside, the cleaner found 2 people lying on the floor. They were positioned side by side. One of them was unresponsive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The cleaner described details that would later become central. She was fully clothed. One shoe was off, lying nearby. Red stains were visible on the walls and floor outside the laundry room, suggesting a struggle. The door itself did not lock. It was partially open when the cleaner arrived. The man beside her was alive, but unresponsive at first. The cleaner said he appeared intoxicated. He had to be shaken awake. And then, according to the cleaner, the man attempted to run up the stairs. Other staff restrained him until police arrived. From an investigative standpoint, this moment matters more than almost anything else. Scenes like this are delicate. Who arrived first? What was touched? What was moved? What was said before anyone understood what they were seeing? Those early minutes can shape everything that follows. Police documented what they saw. Red stains on the man's clothing. Red stains on his hands and feet. Visible injuries on his body. A diagram later included in the police report showed lacerations on his right hand and foot, swelling on his left hand, and a bite mark on his right hand. These observations were recorded before any explanations were formally given. At this stage, investigators were dealing with a narrow set of confirmed facts. 2 people in a restricted area. 1 deceased. 1 injured. No cameras showing how either of them got there. No footage of anyone else entering or leaving the laundry room. What happened next would depend almost entirely on one person's version of events. According to him, after leaving the bar, they returned to their hotel room and argued. He has never publicly explained what the argument was about. There is no recording of it, no witnesses. He says he fell asleep afterward. He says he woke up around 2:30 a.m. and realized she was gone. Then his story takes a dramatic turn. He claims he heard her screaming. He says the screams came from somewhere outside the room. He says he followed the sound through the resort, eventually reaching the laundry room. He claims the door was locked. He says he banged on it until someone inside opened it. According to his account, when he entered the room, she was sitting on the floor. He claimed she had been violently violated. He said there were 3 or 4 other people in the room. This version of events was later shared by her stepfather, who said that when he asked how the man ended up lying next to her on the floor, the question went unanswered, even after being asked multiple times. From an investigative perspective, this is where the case fractures. There are no cameras showing him leaving his room. No cameras showing him moving through hallways. No cameras showing anyone else entering or exiting the laundry room. No witnesses who saw multiple attackers fleeing. If several people were involved, how did they move through a gated, secured resort without being seen? As police continued documenting the scene, another issue emerged. There were no recorded defensive injuries on her, consistent with multiple attackers, and there was no physical evidence that clearly established the presence of anyone other than the 2 people found in that room. This doesn't answer what happened, but it limits what can be confidently claimed. The man was arrested and charged under Mexican law with femicide, the most serious domestic violence charge in the country. The case moved forward as a judge-only trial. There was no jury. The outcome would depend entirely on how one judge interpreted the evidence. During the trial, DNA evidence became central. A report showed that his DNA was not found under her fingernails. One unknown male DNA profile was present. The judge accepted this as significant. Expert testimony also suggested that the severity of her injuries could indicate more than one attacker. In September of 2024, the judge delivered a not guilty verdict. But that verdict didn't explain who the other attackers were. It didn't explain how they entered or exited unseen. And it didn't resolve the contradictions at the heart of the case. After the ruling, forensic biologists independently reviewed the DNA findings and added critical context. Fingernail DNA does not prove guilt or innocence. Foreign DNA can be transferred through ordinary contact. And in cases where a victim is unable to fight back, there may be no attacker DNA at all. In other words, the DNA evidence didn't solve the case. It only narrowed the possibilities. After his acquittal, the man introduced a new explanation. He claimed that cartel violence was responsible. He alleged the resort owed money and refused to pay. He suggested she was targeted as a warning. This claim forced investigators to look outward. Journalists traveled to the region and spoke directly with individuals familiar with cartel operations. One longtime cartel member confirmed that cartels do exert control in the area. Businesses do pay taxes. Violence is used to enforce compliance. But he rejected the theory outright. Cartels, he explained, do not carry out hidden attacks inside private resort rooms. When they send messages, they are public, visible, designed to spread fear. A concealed killing inside a laundry room made no sense within their operating logic. Once again, the case hit a contradiction. A theory that explained violence, but not location, method, or secrecy. And then another layer surfaced. Before she ever arrived in Mexico, she had left behind something deeply unsettling, her own words. During the trial, her sister testified that she kept a journal. Entries described escalating violence in the relationship. She wrote about being hurt while he was intoxicated, about being struck repeatedly, about begging him to stop, about him passing out afterward and not remembering the next day, about him accusing her of lying until swelling made the truth unavoidable. One entry ended with a chilling line. "If I am ever missing or found dead, you know who did it." Journals don't determine guilt, but they reveal patterns. They show what happened when no one else was watching. They add context to claims made later, when memory, fear, and self-interest collide. The journal didn't describe a stranger. It described someone she trusted, someone whose behavior changed with alcohol, someone whose anger appeared suddenly. And that context changed how many people viewed the case. After the acquittal, prosecutors appealed. An independent magistrate reviewed the reasoning behind the verdict. In December of 2025, that magistrate overturned the not guilty ruling, stating it could not stand. An appeal followed. While legal proceedings continue, protests erupted. Petitions were launched. Calls for new laws emerged. including proposals requiring mandatory Canadian forensic autopsies in suspicious deaths abroad. But beneath the legal battles, one fact remains unmoved. She left Canada for her first vacation, a birthday celebration, a place that promised safety, luxury, and insulation from danger, and she never came home. When the magistrate reviewed the original ruling, the focus wasn't on introducing new evidence. It was on whether the first judgment made logical sense given what was already on record. And according to the magistrate, it didn't. Too many contradictions had been dismissed. Too many assumptions had been accepted without proper scrutiny. The conclusion, they said, could not reasonably stand. This decision didn't declare final guilt, but it did something just as important. It acknowledged that the story, as it had been accepted, was incomplete. As the legal process moved forward, attention returned to the details people had argued over from the beginning. The laundry room, the injuries, the timeline, the absence of cameras, the reliance on a single narrative in a place marketed as secure and controlled. Resorts like this are designed to limit unpredictability. Movement is tracked, entry points are monitored, guests are funneled through controlled spaces. And yet, in this case, there were no recordings showing anyone else entering or leaving the laundry room. No footage of multiple attackers navigating hallways, no staff reports of disturbances involving outsiders. That absence doesn't automatically answer what happened, but it challenges what could have happened. Another point that continued to trouble investigators and observers alike was the physical evidence documented before any story had been fully formed. Injuries don't carry intent, but they do tell a sequence. Cuts on hands, swelling, bite marks. These details exist independently of memory or explanation. They don't change depending on who is speaking. And then there was the question of intoxication. Alcohol appeared again and again in the background of this case, on the night itself, in prior incidents described privately, in patterns that seemed to repeat. Alcohol doesn't excuse violence, but it often explains escalation. How situations shift quickly, how memory becomes unreliable, how moments spiral beyond control. This is where the journal entries became impossible to ignore. They weren't written for an audience, they weren't shaped to persuade. They were raw, private attempts to make sense of fear while still inside it. When violence is documented before a tragedy, it doesn't automatically explain the final event, but it reframes it. It narrows the field of plausible explanations. It forces uncomfortable questions about patterns rather than isolated incidents. Was this an unforeseeable attack by unknown people who somehow entered and exited a secured resort unseen? Or was it the final point in an escalation that had already been quietly recorded? Many said the same thing. The hardest part isn't just the loss. It's the uncertainty, legal mechanisms that wouldn't leave families dependent on foreign systems alone. These efforts weren't about rewriting the past. They were about acknowledging that what happened here exposed gaps that shouldn't exist. Meanwhile, the legal process continued in parallel. Slow, technical, procedural. Appeals, reviews, panels of judges. Decisions that would determine whether accountability would ever be fully enforced. And throughout all of it, one image kept resurfacing. A young woman standing on a balcony, smiling, talking about food, talking about the beach, talking about plans that would never happen. That image stands in stark contrast to where she was later found. A restricted room, out of place, out of view, in circumstances that still refuse to align neatly. Cases like this linger not because they are sensational, but because they resist closure. Each explanation seems to answer one question while opening three more. Each theory solves one problem while creating another. If the environment was secure, how did danger enter? If there were multiple attackers, where is the evidence of them? If there were not, how do we reconcile the injuries, the history, and the contradictions? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, how many warning signs exist in real life that only become obvious after it's too late? She went on a trip meant to celebrate life. She trusted a place designed to feel untouchable, and she never came home. If this story made you pause, if it raised questions you can't easily dismiss, then take a moment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep exploring cases that don't have simple answers, make sure you stay connected. One last question before you go. Do you think this case was a tragic anomaly, or the result of a pattern that was already unfolding long before that trip ever began? Let me know what you think in the comments.